Hello, in this presentation I will talk about the concept of myth in relation to literary studies. For a written extended discussion, please see my forthcoming chapter on myth and literature within the section on philosophy of literature of the Palgrave Macmillan Handbook of Philosophy and Literature, which will be published by the end of 2017. Myth, philosophy, and literature have grown together since ancient times, as if branches of the same tree, sharing its vital sap. According to Bruce Lincoln, Hesiod in his Theogony, and Homer in the Iliad and the Odyssey, privileged mythos at the expense of logos, regarding the former as discourse of truth, and the latter as discourse of deception. With Socrates and especially Plato's Republic, myth was revalorized by being disconnected from truth and treated as state propaganda, while logos became, in Lincoln's words, quote, the discourse and practice of the ruling elite within an emergent regime of truth that called and calls itself philosophy, end quote. Lincoln begins his examination of mythos and logos from the words in which the Muses address the poet of Hesiod's Theogony. And this is what the Muses say. We know how to recount many falsehoods like real things, and we know how to proclaim truths when we wish, end quote. In Lincoln's analysis, the first line refers to logos and the second to myth. The analysis is further developed in reference to Homeric hymns and epics to argue that in archaic Greece, quote, logos denoted speech acts of seduction, beguilement, and deception, end quote, rather than rational argumentation. Lincoln argues that logos was the speech of structural inferiors, who, by using it, outwitted those who held power over them, while mythos was the speech of the preeminent, above all poets and kings, a genre, like them, possessed of high authority, having the capacity to advance powerful truth claims and backed by physical force. Thus, the terms logos and mythos refer to different registers of discourse, which we might ascribe, in the perspective of Mikhail Bakhtin's theories of monoglossia and heteroglossia, to prose, logos, and poetry, mythos. In this view, the language of a poetic work, like mythos, realizes itself as something about which there can be no doubt, something that cannot be disputed, something all-encompassing. By contrast, the language of prose, like logos, is a language of negotiation of different perspectives in dialogic discourse, conveying a sense of historical and social concreteness, relativity of point of view, and the feeling of participation in historical becoming and in social struggle. One might say then that myth is essentially a poetic literary style, a mode of representing reality that aims to engender belief. In that, it can be harnessed by an ideology, a notion introduced through the conception of false consciousness developed in the line of thought that proceeds from Hegel to Marx. However, connecting myth and ideology is eventually problematic. Etymologically, the term ideology, coined by the French thinker Destutt de Tracy in the late 18th century, comes from the Greek idea and logos. Logos is now understood in the Aristotelian sense of reasoned discourse. For Aristotle, poetry retains the privilege of an intimate connection to truth, but myth is seen as a discourse of persuasion rather than as a discourse of truth, a position which remained dominant for centuries. Thus, in 1880, Matthew Arnold, in The Study of Poetry, aligns the superior character of truth and seriousness with the matter and substance of the best poetry. The features of discourse conveying truth and seriousness, which were connected with myth before Aristotle and the Golden Age of Greece, are now connected with poetry. And poetry thinks emotionally, whereas science, and we might add ideology, understood by the Tracy as the science of ideas, do not. In 1879, in On Poetry, Arnold distinguishes science, which adds thought to thought, accumulates the elements of a synthesis, from the idea of poetry nested in a world of religiously experienced divine illusion. Ideology and myth do not sit well together, but myth and poetry do, even though they are separated by the transfer of the characteristic of truth from the former to the latter. Thank you.